Right, today's review is for a very long-term favourite book of mine, classic sci-fi, currently being reprinted by Masterworks, I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. I discovered this book when I was in my teens and I've been rereading it ever since. Not this specific book, my original copy completely disintegrated under the pressures of rereading and travelling around the world with it. I still think it's a classic of the science fiction genre. It's a trailblazer of modern horror genre, and it is a simply beautifully written story of isolation and what it does to a person. It's one of the earliest good vampire books that I ever read, at least. And Matheson's writing is spectacular. It's never not good. He doesn't seem to be terribly well known. And this book certainly doesn't. Most people think of I Am Legend, they think of Omega Man, which is a really old black and white sci-fi, or they think of the movie, the I Am Will Smith movie, which I did watch, raging all the while at how much they'd warped and tortured one of my favourite stories. So the main character in this one is Robert Neville, who believes that he's probably the last human being on Earth. At least he's the last living man within the sphere that he can reach, because it's set in the 70s, so of course you didn't have internet, and Robert was a small town guy. He lived a normal life somewhere in America, mid-America I think it was. He had a wife, a baby daughter, and a job at a plant, which he commuted to with his neighbour. But at the start of the book, when all this has been going on for months, Robert huddles in his boarded up house every night while vampires rage and scream around the outside. Vampires that are hungry for his blood. His ex-neighbour and ex-co-worker calls for him to come out each night. Not the carpool to work neighbour anymore, but because he wants to drink Neville's blood. The slow reveal of the world building is spectacular. Neville's world is restricted to his house, a greenhouse in which he grows mostly garlic, which helps keep out vampires. He's got mirrors positioned on the windows which also work against them. And he huddles in his house every night listening to his records, getting drunk, surviving, but only just. During the day he can leave the house and go around. He makes little stakes in the workshop out the back with which he kills all the vampires he can find during the day, but there are always more. And he has to be careful on cloudy days, because on cloudy days they come out earlier. But I still think this is probably one of the best vampire books I've ever read. But the key to really enjoying it is the writing, which is so evocative. The loneliness is described so hauntingly that you find it aching in your own body. Neville's life is hedged with restrictions that keep him alive on a day-to-day basis, and there's nothing to relieve his grieving for his wife and his daughter, whom he had to dispose of. In the last days of civilization, they were burning all the bodies, and you slowly learn about those experiences through the book. Neville is no hero, and some days and nights he's barely holding it together with whiskey and garlic, but the lack of heroism makes him a very, very relatable character. And I think Matheson's characters tend to be similar from what I've read. I think if you read a lot of Matheson's, you'll find that Neville isn't too different from other heroes, and even the standard American Midwest family of wife and small daughter seems to be replicated. It certainly was in the Shrinking Man, I think it is. What is it? Yes, there we go. In The Shrinking Man, you saw very great similarities in his characterizations. But that doesn't make them any nicer, and this was any less nice. And Matheson was my first encounter with him was I Am Legend, so I still adore it. So eventually, in order to stop slowly killing himself with whiskey, he decides to investigate the phenomena of vampirism. But Robert Neville is no scientist, and so he starts with science libraries to try and learn the skills that he needs in order to investigate vampires scientifically. It's a shame how little known this book is. It's like I've met so many people who have never heard of it, even classic science fiction readers. I think This is a book that if you like classic science fiction and if you like horror, you're better off reading this one than many of the other ones that are more classically touted. I think it's an absolutely brilliant book. If you've already seen the movie versions, which were not that great, move on to that, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Well, it is about vampires, and I think the vampire element is quite spectacular. Ultimately, it's a book about humanity and the experience of one human all alone. And the ending, which I am not going to expose, is magnificently stark and dark and yet unexpected. So, yes. Now, the thing that I've never said before, which YouTube tells me I need to say like, comment, and subscribe. Apparently, that is a good thing to do. I do it to other YouTubers. But I'm especially interested in the comments. I love reading books. I love talking about books. If you comment about one of my book reviews, I will be delighted to engage in conversation with it. If you're rude, I'll ignore you. So, comment.